Welcome to Common Sense Hour. So, as the rest of the world begins to roll back their mandates, COVID passports, and authoritarian policies that have proven unsuccessful in combating the spread of COVID-19, the United States presses on with more inconsistent and contradictory policies that continue to leave the public confused and increasingly angry. And as we all grow tired of the doublespeak, the evasiveness, and lack of answers, more and more of the people we previously dismissed as conspiracy theorists are suddenly starting to look a lot less crazy and way more sensible in the many warnings they gave us prior to being silenced by the state and the bureaucratic machine that props up the interests of big pharma and even the surveillance state, which engages in silencing voices of dissent in order to maintain control over the masses of Americans. Now, one example of the nonsensical policies that have been imposed on Americans is the new guidance from the CDC, which recently decreased the isolation period for those infected with COVID from 10 days to 5 days. It also states that people infected with COVID-19 can leave isolation after just 5 days and return to work if they're asymptomatic or if their symptoms are resolving. So that means that according to their new guidelines, people can return to work with COVID-19 and symptoms. And it's for employers with mandates for their employees, their unvaccinated workers who test negative for COVID or have natural immunity from previous infection. They can't show up to work, or they've already been fired. Another example of the nonsensical policies is displayed in the CDC's new report on Omicron infections, which state that 99.5% of all new cases in the United States are Omicron, which we all know presents as a common cold with mild symptoms and much lower rates of hospitalization and zero legitimately reported deaths. But in spite of this information that reports almost 100% of new COVID cases as mild and with a shorter infection cycle, our government officials continue in their unrelenting fearmongering and heavy-handed mandates. We have to face the fact that the guidance we've received to date has simply made no sense. We also have to come to terms with the truth, which is that we have been lied to multiple times by Anthony Fauci, Joe Biden, and the mainstream media. There is no universal truth in science, other than the fact that science itself is an ever-evolving study of hypotheses, newly introduced data, tested theories, and questions, where the answers sometimes might change whenever new information is introduced. So there is no singular authority on science, no matter how much Tony Fauci may present himself as such. In fact, the least scientific thing one could say is that their conclusion is the only one that must be considered. So if there's any one assignment that we all must challenge ourselves to embark upon, is to accept the task of making things make sense. Don't accept information solely because you view the person giving it as an authority without even questioning or requiring reasonable explanation, especially when the subsequent decisions directly impact your life and the lives of your loved ones and your children. We all have a moral responsibility to question what we have been taught. We don't have to disagree, but we must question it. Otherwise, we serve as mere mouthpieces for someone else's point of view or agenda. We teach our children to always remain curious and ask questions, because that's the best way for them to learn. So whenever you come across someone who discourages you from asking questions, that is someone you cannot trust. Peace.